This is the download from Sounds Profitable, your daily source for the essential news in the business of podcasting, brought to you by Spreaker from iHeart. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Before I get into the news, a quick bit of housekeeping. Today is the final issue of the Download Daily newsletter and podcast until January 6th. Tomorrow morning's issue of the Download Recap will be the last missive you receive from Sounds Profitable until then. So I'd just like to take this moment to wish you all a very happy holidays. Maybe you get some rest and some relaxation as this year comes to a close. With that said, here's what you need to know for today, Thursday, December 19th. Our first story, the most important thing podcasting needs to talk about in 2025. This article from Tom Webster is a look at how podcast audiences perceive their own media consumption habits. Looking at what media formats respondents to the podcast landscape 2024 consumed both more and less of this year, the data suggests younger folk are eschewing audio for video in general, not just podcasting. Tom Webster reflects on his own struggle to get his son to listen to podcasts and proposes his issue was not selling spoken word as a concept instead of podcasts specifically. Spoken word audio is the core of podcasting, and in 2025, a concerted effort should be made to teach people the value and special nature of spoken word. Next up, as brands embrace use of influencer, creative, and programmatic, creator marketing expands beyond social. This year, several brands, including Arm & Hammer, Miko, and Snapdragon, have dipped their toes into using influencer-made marketing content in their programmatic ad inventory, moved through Amazon, The Trade Desk, and Google-owned demand-side platforms. Several agencies interviewed by Digiday have done similar work, allowing influencer marketing to break free of purely living in the social media sphere. Next up, top 5 predictions for podcast advertising in 2025. The Right Side Up crew have written a list of predictions for the coming year in podcast advertising. They anticipate a standout media mix modeling, MMM, partner to arise in the field, terminology developed for audio posted as video, more detailed YouTube attribution for podcasts. This is labeled as a blue sky hope, admittedly. Podcast advertisers will get into streaming audio, and a research partner will integrate cross-channel reach and frequency for traditional brands. For a look back at the year behind us, Acast has published 5 key podcast trends from this year in On the Mic Top Consumer Podcast Trends of 2024. Next up, the year-end charts from podcast to startup funding. The information has constructed a table of all superstar podcast deals signed this year, from Armchair Expert's $80 million Wondery deal to Rogan's reportedly $250 million multi-year contract with Spotify. They also note linear TV has declined in popularity with advertisers as spend continues a downward trend, while influencer marketing continues upward. Influencer marketing is indeed interlinked with many of the biggest podcasts, but there's also potential in the long tail of podcasting's creator economy to continue upward momentum. Finally, Triton Digital releases the November 2024 Canada Podcast Ranker. In November, the Canadian podcast landscape remained largely stable, with the top 3 entries in CanCon, Canadian content, French language podcasts, and English language podcasts remaining the same from October. The top-ranked overall podcast not filtered for Canadian content production was Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Their top networks report finds CBC/Radio Canada took the first place with 1.85 million weekly downloads, just above Wondery in second place with 1.78 million. As for the rest of the news, Edison Research has published the 2024 edition of the Latino Podcast Listener Report. AudioFlux is holding its first ever fundraiser. Nielsen has partnered with attention measurement provider Realize to launch new tools for evaluating creative effectiveness. Music journalist Samia Krishnamurthy covers podcasting's role in this summer's intense beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Quill and Canadian Business have partnered to release The Moment, a podcast about pivotal moments in the history of Canadian founders and entrepreneurs. The Red Circle blog has a new post covering trends seen in podcast advertising throughout the year, and Barometer has launched contextual targeting and brand suitability targeting for programmatic audio. Be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or at soundsprofitable.com, where you can also subscribe to the newsletter version of the show. The download is written and produced by myself, Gavin Gaddis, Newton Shadowcotty, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. This episode is hosted on Spreaker. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis. Download us again tomorrow for the last time this year.